Welcome to another Dead Stick Adventures video. As you all know, we've got a bit of a crush on Cherokees around here, and today's delight is no exception. Brace yourselves as I introduce you to the Cherokee Arrow. Back in 1987, Piper decided to give the Cherokee a bit of a dose of sexiness, and that's what we've got here for you today, a 1987 Piper Cherokee Arrow. We'll kick things off with a dive into the background and rich history of this iconic aircraft. Following that, join us for an extensive walk around, examining every detail of the exterior, and of course we won't miss the opportunity to capture some stunning shots of her in flight. After the exterior tour, we'll step inside for an intimate look at the interior and how should I say, period correct avionics installed in this Piper Arrow 4. For your convenience, we've organised the video into chapters, which you can see below. Feel free to skip to the sections that pique your interest the most. Let's embark on this journey and discover the story of the Piper Arrow 4. Released to the market in 1967, the Piper Arrow presented itself as a more complex version of the somewhat humble Cherokee. Capitalising on a perceived gap in the market, Piper saw an opportunity, especially with the unfortunate forced retirement of the Comanche fleet. Designed to compete, albeit modestly, with the upscale offerings from Beech and Mooney, the Arrow really found its place in the industry. Let's take a closer look at how the Arrow managed to navigate the market dynamics of its time. So there are 4 models of Arrow. The original Arrow, the Arrow 2, ready for it, the Arrow 3, and what we've got here in Kilo Juliet Oscar, the Arrow 4. This model was developed from the Cherokee 180 and inherited all the classic characteristics of the Cherokees that we know and love. That's the iconic Hershey bar wing, the stabilator, but with a transformative twist. We've got retractable landing gear, a constant speed prop, and the added sophistication of fuel injection. Here's a fascinating nugget of history for you. At its launch, the Piper Arrow was $1,320 cheaper than the Mooney M20 Mark C, with a base price of $16,990. But don't let that middle-of-the-road price fool you. As soon as you wanted something useful in the aeroplane, like an ADF or a VOR, the price soared to about $2,000 above the Mooney Mark 21. In 1972, the aviation scene was graced with the arrival of the Arrow 2, featuring notably enhanced engine power thanks to the upgraded 200 horsepower Lycoming IO360. The Arrow 2 distinguished itself from its predecessor. The real standout move was Piper's decision to adopt the Archer's fuselage instead of the Cherokee 180s. This gave the Arrow 2 an additional 5 inches of fuselage, 26 inches more wing, and a broader tail. So the release of the Arrow 2 wasn't just an evolution, it was a strategic leap forward for the model. The year 1977 ushered in the Arrow 3. Often people think of it as the pinnacle of the Arrow models. Distinguishes itself with a semi-tapered wing and larger fuel tanks, so you get an additional 24 gallons. The Arrow 3 really set a new standard for the model. Piper even offered an optional turbo variant powered by a 6-cylinder Continental TIO 360. So despite the initial excellence of the Arrow, Piper then made a design shift that was pretty controversial and tarnished the Arrow model. They moved the stabilator to the top of the tail. With that shift, thus was born the Piper Arrow 4. This example, Kilo Juliet Oscar. Now it's a PA28 RT201. It's a PA28 because it's a PA28 bodied Cherokee. You remember the same body as the Archer. R for retractable, T for T-tail, and the 201 represents 200 horsepower with a tapered wing. 200 will be used for the straight wing Arrow. Up the front of Kilo Juliet Oscar, we've got the IO360. I for injected, O for opposed. It's a 360 cubic inch, 200 horsepower unit mated to a 2-blade Hartzell prop. You can straight away tell the difference between the Continental powered versions of the Arrow and the Lycoming powered versions of the Arrow. If we get this prop out of the way, you'll see this cowl is exactly the same as what was used on the Archers. These nice rounded intakes, and this bulge up the top here is the same view you get out of the windscreen of an Archer. So because of the reduced drag of moving the stabilator from down low to up high out of the prop wash, the Arrows were good for about 143 knots. Well, they were advertised at 143 knots. And up high in some of the turbo versions, you could even do about 175. on a good day. Over the years, this one's developed a bit of a limp and she's good for about 135 knots in cruise. The beauty of the Arrow 4 and the Arrow 3 is it's got the longer fuselage than the early Arrows, so it means you can comfortably seat 3 or 4 passengers. With 72 gallons of fuel in the wings and the efficiency of the IO360, it meant the Arrow was good for about 6.5 hours endurance. This wing provided a predictable and benign stall, along with the easy landing characteristics which were the hallmark of Pipers. The climb performance won't blow you away, but that's not really what the Arrow is about. Instead, it offers a purposeful experience tailored for aspiring private pilots eager to step into the realm of retractable, constant speed aircraft. In fact, as an instructor, I just put a student through their PPL in the Archer, and this was their first step up into retractable constant speed. The guy went out and bought an Arrow 4. And the reason why I recommended it is with their 20 or 30 knot faster cruise speed and the constant speed prop and the retractable gear, it offers the perfect platform for a new aviator to up-level their skills into the next level of aircraft. Simple, robust and reliable is the hallmark of the Arrow gear. There's an electric motor powering a hydraulic pump to bring the wheels up, and they can fall via gravity in emergency situation. The nose gear swings up into this wheel well with doors to reduce drag. When the main gear retracts, it swings up into the wheel wells and the tyres are still visible. So it's a bit like a 737 in that regard. So while we're under here, we'll talk about the AD or airworthiness directive that's required for the bolt holes for the main spar. You have to do an eddy current inspection when they get over a certain amount of hours. Fortunately, the cover's broken on this one, so I'm able to show it to you. We talked a lot more about the AD that's required on these Cherokees in our Cherokee 235 video, which you can see linked above. This side of the fuselage is all classic Piper. If you've flown an Archer or a later Cherokee, it's all going to be very familiar to you. Simple baggage door, the little strap that holds it in place, and it's got a 150 pound, this one's got a 200 pound max for the baggage area. And of course on this side, all classic Piper stuff, the single door for entry if you've flown a Cessna, something to get used to, and a single point of entry for both passengers and pilots alike. So the interior is classic Piper. The cockpit feels a bit like a warm, familiar hug. If you've flown a Cherokee or an Archer or anything like that, you're going to be right at home. Let's have a look at some of this period correct instrumentation. You've got your standard 6-pack, and then we've got a couple of Navaid receivers here. Then of course we've got the GPS, we've got a radio, and we've got an up-to-date transponder. The engine instruments are a little bit obscured in the Arrow, manifold pressure and fuel flow and RPM down here, which means you end up doing a little dance, runway, airspeed, instruments, runway, airspeed, instruments. And of course, because the cockpit is classic Cherokee, you've got this throttle quadrant, but new to the Arrow is of course the gear lever and the blue lever to control pitch. In the back here, it's pretty roomy and it's nicely well ventilated. I've got plenty of leg room because of the extra stretch, that extra few inches because of the Archer fuselage. And we've got some vents down on the floor here and above my head. So I'd be pretty comfortable to do a reasonably long leg in this one. So there we have it, that's the Piper Arrow. If you're currently flying a fixed gear Cherokee or Archer and you're thinking about moving it up to something a little more complex, one of these would be a great introduction. So if you're in the market for an Arrow, you really can't go wrong with any of the models, but the standout, the cream of the crop, is the Arrow 3 with that conventional tail. In fact, the Arrow 3 was such a standout that when Piper resumed production in 1995, they called it just the Arrow, and the production only ended 4 years ago. It was such a standout. Thanks for sticking with us. It's been great having you to have a look at this popular and reliable aircraft. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and hit the subscribe button so you can know when we get new videos out. Give us a thumbs up and a comment.